Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Bridge. This is the show where we bridge you from Sunday to Sunday and bridge God's Word from our heads to our hearts and learn how to apply what we learned in Sunday's message in our real lives. Tonight, I'm honored to have Pastor Paul Marshall with us again. You're a regular on The Bridge by now. I think this is the third time. Pastor Paul gave us a great message this Sunday. This is our Jesus Stories series, so we've been preaching through the parables of Jesus. In this case, Pastor Paul brought us a message on the unforgiving servant. Do you want to talk a little bit about your message that you brought to us?
So yeah, it's interesting the way that I don't know why I was so passionate when we were talking about hey, what messages that we want to bring forth, and we kind of had a round table with a few of the guys, and I think it's just something that I've struggled with, and I've seen myself grow. And then I've seen myself crash, and I've seen myself grow in this whole idea of forgiveness. And that was kind of what motivated me to say, hey, this is what I want to teach about, because it's something that I find myself doing over and over, trying to grow in over and over. So just taking this idea that, in a nutshell, God's forgiveness for us is so great, more than we can ever imagine, more than we could ever deserve, but His love is for it so great that He forgives it all.
Nice.
And we can so quickly, just like the Unforgiving Servant, we can so quickly turn around and offer none of that grace, none of that hope to anyone else.
Yep. And
including ourselves.
Yep.
Like, there's this act of forgiveness that if we don't practice, we're never going to lay hold of it.
Yep.
So that was kind of the motivation behind it, and kind of the nutshell of the story, so to speak.
For you guys who are following along at home, if you haven't seen the message, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and look up Pastor Paul's message. It's called Settling the Score on the Unforgiving Servant. This one's from Matthew 18, and kind of a high level, the parable was, hey, this guy owed his master what did we say, like $4 billion.
Right.
It was something, it was 10,000 talents. It was a ridiculous amount of money. And the guy said, hey, give me some more time. And the master, he said, know what? I'm going to have mercy on you. Rather than have you and your wife and your kids sold, I'm going to actually give you mercy. I'm going to forgive that debt, that 10,000 talents. That same servant turned around and some other guy owed him 100 denarii, which was a very small amount of money. That same servant would not forgive the other guy and actually had him jailed in order to repay. Well, the master found out about it. The master said, whoa, hold on now. No, you know what? You're going to pay every last drop that you owe me because you would not forgive as you've been forgiven. I liked the extreme nature of it as well, the notion of 10,000 talents. So a talent, we talked about lots of ways to talk about a talent. It could be like $2 million. It could be 20 years wages. Right. That's one way to talk about it. So when the servant said, hey, just give me more time, I'll pay you back. 20 years wages times 10,000. He'd need 200,000 years to work to earn how much he owed to be able to give that back to the master. I joked with someone, even the president, Donald Trump, would have trouble paying back a debt of the scale that we're talking about here in the billions of dollars range versus a common laborer would. So that's kind of a quick overview. The parables in Matthew 18, it's a great one to check out as well. And
along that line, John, with talent, we do translate often about it in money, but talent unto itself is weight. So when we think of the weight of our sin or the weight of our offenses on one another, and when we put those on each other, we crush people. And we don't always intend to. Actually, we very rarely intend to, but it does. Those things, we hurt one another in such a way where we put all this weight and we literally crush each other.
Yep.
And, so again, I think the story was awesome as it relates to dollars, but there is this weight that has to be carried by somebody. And when we put that hurt on somebody else,
I love when you started the message, you said, hey, have you ever been hurt by someone? And have you ever hurt someone? And the interesting thing is, a lot of times I can remember all of the times that somebody hurt, this person hurt me that way, this person hurt me that way. But then thinking about, hey, all the ways that I've hurt someone else, I don't want to keep that list. I don't want to remember that because that can be pretty hurtful. But you said it's like a burden that we carry. It's a weight on us that will press us down and crush us. I think you said 15 dump trucks was how much, like big, we think of kids playing with little dump trucks. These are actual big dump trucks.
Each dump truck holds 15 tons.
Wow.
And it's 15 times 15 tons. So it's 225 tons.
That's incredible amount of weight.
Of Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible amount of weight.
You said something that, because we did Lord's Supper also Sunday, the whole notion when we take the Lord's Supper and Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. And when you said remember, we don't often remember the way that we hurt people because we don't realize the depth of that. So one of the things I think that helps me is when I realize the hurt that I feel, it helps me internalize it so that I can remember some of my own actions. And when we think about remembering as it relates to the Lord's Supper or remembering our sin no more, it's not a mind thing where we just forget it. It's not like I wake up and, I don't remember it anymore.
Right.
It's remember it in light of the covenant that God has with us. Remember it in that light, and all of a sudden it has a different connotation, has a different weight, has a different everything, because now all of a sudden it's a forgiving covenant that I also need to enter into with you, with
whoever,
my wife, my children, those that I often offend the most, those that are closest to me.
Yep. And that's often the case, for all of us.
Right.
Those who are closest to us, those are the ones who have the power to hurt us more than anything else, and also that we have the power to hurt, even unintentionally. And I think that's the hardest part sometimes. So often you have good intentions, but still somebody ends up getting hurt. And the first thing I want to do is start justifying. Well, I didn't mean that. I meant it this way. And but at the end of the day, if that person's hurt, it's kind of our responsibility to go and ask for forgiveness. You know what? I'm sorry that I hurt you. I didn't mean to, but I'm sorry that I hurt you. People sometimes will, if I hurt you, then I'm no. That's not what we're talking about here. Like the genuine, let's ask for the forgiveness and let's give the forgiveness.
So I'm gonna flip the tables and ask you a question.
Sure.
If somebody says I'm sorry or somebody apologizes, does that hold something? Does that hold a different tone to you than if somebody said, "Hey, John, will you forgive me?"
I think it does. I think it does.
Because I was actually wrestling with that on the way here. Because I was going through some things that have happened, and I'm like, I said sorry, but then I'm like, what was I really? Was I saying sorry that I hurt him? Sorry you took offense? Right. Or I'm saying, forgive me because what I did was wrong. I recognize what I did was wrong. And because so I kind of flip that because
I think that's a good point.
We say sorry a lot. Maybe so much that we just say sorry.
Right.
Sorry. That's your problem now. And that's not what it's about.
I think so. And I think sometimes even, I'm not a parent, but I've seen a lot of parents with kids say, go say sorry to your sister, go say sorry to your brother. And the little kids just find sorry and then move on. Are they really? But if they come to say, you know what, I really screwed up, will you forgive me? That almost has a deeper acknowledgement of, hey, I did something wrong. I'm taking responsibility for that, and I'm asking you to forgive me. That's and it's great when we get that. Sometimes we'll never get that from the person who hurt us, unfortunately, and God still says, you know what, 70 times, 7 times, you still need to forgive.
Even though they didn't ask for forgiveness. Because they hurt you, it doesn't take away our responsibility to forgive them. It's like, forgive them what? They offended. They did something against me. It's like, and you're now holding on to that with bitterness. You're holding on to that with an attitude of everything that's not who God is. And you're trying to, more than likely, looking for opportunities to settle the score. Settling
the score. I love that title too, because that hit home as well. You want to turn the tables, and you want to almost get even. When you're wronged. I'm going to pause right now. I just want to say hi to the people out in Chatland. You guys, like I said, Pastor Paul gave a great message on Sunday. What are your thoughts on forgiveness, or some questions you might have had for him or for us that we can discuss? Please feel free to throw it there. I agree, Queen. We need God to help us so that we can lay down that weight that kind of is weighing on us when we're not forgiving. And that's so hard. Chantel pointed out that I'm sorry can be thrown around, that it's not meaningful anymore. Sorry and move on. Or I said I'm sorry. And kind of not knowing what's going on there.
And Chantel, one of the stories that didn't make it it ended up on the cutting floor, was, I remember that growing up with my sisters, and my mom going, I want you to sit there or go to your room and think about what you did. So I go and I think, she's like, now go apologize. I'm like, sorry. No. Like, you mean it. sorry? Yeah, I mean, so like you change that tone. It's like,
Yeah.
now, did that come across as I meant it?
Yeah.
And again, but it's this inner part of who we are
Yep.
that has to change.
Yep.
And when we think about forgiveness being a heart thing, unforgiveness is also a heart thing. It's a hard heart thing.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that I guess we haven't done a whole lot on spiritual warfare, but there's a spiritual warfare going on that we do certain things and we hold a certain attitude, and once we hold that, things start to build.
Yeah.
And that whole idea that we give Satan a toehold in our lives and then a foothold in our lives.
Yeah.
And I think about, I don't know if you've ever gone to the pool and you wanted to kind of test the water, so you kind of get up and you kind of just walk by and touch it with your toe and keep going. You know, just to check to see. And that's kind of what we do with people. We just kind of check and see, are we good, rather than making sure that we're good. And then before we know it, something's got a hold of us. And now we're doing battle.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I couldn't agree more, Chantel, with that idea. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Ace asked a question too about God being powerful. If God is so powerful, why is he? What? Can you scroll? Yeah, thank you. If God's so powerful, why is he so easy to offend, or why is he so easily offended?
And you know what? I think that's
an interesting question.
Yeah, and I think that's so awesome because where I thought I was going, I spent a whole lot more time on the first 4 or 5 verses of this than I thought I was going to. But yes, God is powerful. But the other element of who God is he is holy and he is pure. God is so pure that anything that you would add to the bucket, if it's not pure, it's going to have a major effect on. So why is it that God is offended? Because it's not because of his lack of power. It's because of his complete purity, his complete holiness. That God is so pure, so holy, that anything, so many things come up against him as an offense.
Yeah.
But he's also powerful enough to say, I can take, not only can I raise you from the dead, I can take every sin, any wrong, every offense, and take it away from you.
Right.
And I can remove it from you as far as the east is from the west.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to carry that sin anymore.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I have the power. I have the power. I have the 15 truckloads, 225-ton power to carry all of that sin.
Yeah.
So he demonstrates that because
Yeah.
through his power is demonstrated, through his holiness, through his purity, to be able to purify and cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
Yeah.
And that's power.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, the notion of sin is just harmful. You know, when we're missing the mark of God's standard, God's perfection, God's holiness, it not only offends God, but it actually hurts one another. It hurts ourselves. It hurts others. You talked, and I loved the analogy that you gave. Like, look, somebody stole your car and wrecked it. You can forgive them, but at the end of the day, you still have a smashed car. There are still consequences for that action, and somebody's got to take care of it. And I like what you said there. God has the ability, not only the ability, but the willingness that he already sent his son to die, come back from the dead to pay that price. He can do what we can't do. He can pay that debt that we can never pay. But the notion that sin has real consequences is a real thing. It's not imaginary. It's not like, oh, why is he so easily offended? Sin destroys, and sin breaks our relationship with God, breaks our relationship with one another. You really, if you do something to offend your wife, she's really hurt.
Right.
And we need to do something, or I do something to offend my friend or a coworker or a colleague or whoever. There's a real damage there. And those hearts, those things sometimes we don't see for a long time, and it can build up. And other people can come back later and say, you know what, that really hurt. That comment that you made, I'm like, man, I didn't even remember saying that. But yeah, that really hurt me and that really struck. Right. And sometimes we don't realize that we're doing it. Like you said, it's not always an intentional, but it's something that there's damage when that sin occurs. So those debts are real. Those consequences are real.
And I know, I think Danny mentioned this. As soon as I left stage, I went and did virtual communion. So I didn't actually stay for the closing of Sunday. But when we think of forgiveness, or we think of sin, all sin had to have a sacrifice, a blood sacrifice to be forgiven. that's the story of the Old Testament. That was the covenant, that there be a blood sacrifice for every offense. And forgiveness, that word forgiveness actually is where today we get the word scapegoat. And people would bring their sacrifices, put blood on the altar. That blood would be taken by the priest, put on the horns of that goat, and that goat would be taken and led out of the city. So that sin would be carried away. But somebody's carrying it. Somebody's feeling it. Somebody, so that is that whole idea of that there has to be a sacrifice. And Christ is that sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice for us.
Yeah. So good. The other thing that really struck me about the message was when you talk about at the very end, the unforgiving servant was handed over to the jailer, was one way to translate that word, but the jailer who specializes in torture. Right. So you're handing him over to be tortured. That seems kind of harsh,
right?
At the end of the day. But I like the connection that you drew between our unforgiveness. Can you talk a little bit more about unforgiving and kind of the torture?
So I think this goes hand in hand with another thing that I kind of dabbled. I say dabbled. I kind of said it and then ran away from it. Was this idea of forgiving yourself? That's another element of being tortured. I know, or the best example that I have of being tortured because of my sin. I don't know the effects of my sin on you always. It hurt you, but you're carrying those chains. You're carrying that bondage. You're carrying the hurt of that. And I sometimes will never know that. But when I think about myself and realize that I'm often tortured by some of the things that I won't forgive me for. And that's kind of how I reckon those things, the things that I put on myself and the things I unknowingly put on others, that I literally have tortured them. And I'm going to share the story, and forgive me. I won't mention her by name, but my wife. I didn't mention her by name, right? So, my first wife, my current wife.
And your only wife, right?
Yeah. But I remember her continuing to tell stories about high school and certain things that people did. And I was one of those people, not even knowing it. And I was one of those people because she's like, I used to avoid that hallway because whenever people would walk by, you guys would say stuff or you would do stuff. It was just a group of us. I don't remember saying anything or not saying anything. Were we probably rude or ignorant or hurtful at times? I guarantee it. Looking more for a laugh than an intention to hurt or not hurt somebody. Right. But that was 34 years ago, maybe more than, I can't do the math. But that was 34 years ago. And to this point, if I say something in a manner, she says it's like reliving that all over.
Oh, wow.
It's like taking that on again.
Wow.
And it's something that, I desire to kind of revisit that conversation, especially after doing this message, to go, hey, can I help you? Can I walk with you to kind of let some of that stuff go, to not continue to be tortured? And why can't we let it go? Why can't she let that go any more than I can let go of some of my own hurts? Why can't we forgive ourselves? And I think largely, if I could simplify the answer, is because we fully haven't laid hold of the amount of grace that we have from a God who forgives us. And that's why I went back to, that's why I spent so much time on that front end. Because if we don't get that, I'll never forgive myself because I'm not worthy of forgiveness. Do you know what a dirtbag I am? Yes, you probably do. But I'm worse than that, you know what I mean? Because I know my secret thoughts. I know, all of those things. But again, it makes it very hard. But to think for 34 years, she's been tortured by the way that those things make her feel. I was actually extremely blessed by somebody who came up at the end of service and said, it hit so close to home because I was kidnapped as a 9-year-old.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And I carried that for almost 50 years. Wow. And when I released that, when I said, know what? There's nothing that I'm going to do to change that. I'm going to kind of forgive that wrong. And that person said, it changed my life.
Wow.
And
Wow.
you're going, wow.
Yeah.
But for 50 years, you carry that. And
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just, wow.
and it's real easy for me to say, well, just let it go. Just break out in song, you know what I mean? Put on your favorite Elsa outfit and just start singing. Let it go.
Yeah.
All right, I won't keep doing that. I won't sing. But
Wow. Wow. That's incredible.
yeah, no, it is. And
Right.
you don't know the things that you don't know the things that you say and how they'll affect. But that person, the words they said back to me, so encouraged me, because some of those things I feel like I just can't do because I've been dealing with that same struggle for 30 years or 40 years or whatever.
Yeah.
And for her to say 50 years and then I was able to do it.
Yeah.
I'm going,
Yeah.
all right, God, you can do this, and you desire to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. That notion, I just thought of the word grace to forgive. You know, that it's a gracious gift that God gives us, the ability to forgive one another, to be forgiven by Him, and then in light of that, to be able to forgive one another. But wow, that's just, you know, that's over the top when you think about that for that many years to carry that and to be able to let it go. I mean, that's to truly let it go. I can imagine the relief of putting that burden down.
And some of that and some of that goes to you realize yourself that amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I too often think I'm better than everybody else. So amazing grace is a lot less for me than it is for you, because I'm so much better than you, John.
Right. Saved a wretch like y'all.
Yeah, you know,
Wretch
so
like me. Yeah.
I'm not so bad.
Yeah.
So I think in a way we've become numb to God's grace.
Yeah.
We've just kind of it's just kind of ho hum, and we don't wake up in the morning going, God saved me.
Yeah.
I was blind, now I see.
Yeah.
I was wretched, and now I'm whole.
Yeah.
So
I did like Pastor Danny put some really good insights in the chat as well. He said God's nature is love, not anger. Anger is a reaction to a moment, but His loving kindness and mercy is not a reaction. It's the expression of who He is. I thought that's an important thing too when we think about that. When we're talking about forgiving ourselves, one of my good friends told me once, and it's a privilege that we have knowing Christ and kind of being given new life in Him. He said, you are not tarnish trying to become silver. You are silver that still has tarnish on it.
Right.
At our heart, we've been born again. We've been made new in Christ. We've been given a new heart, a heart of flesh that loves God. And the real us is the one that loves to follow God and loves to do the right thing. We see that, you know, and Paul talked about it too, that war between his old self and his new self. And and while we're on this side of eternity, we have that war, and that sin nature is going to pull us, and we're going to screw things up.
Right.
But that's not who you are. And that reminder was such an important thing when you think of God's grace. That's not who God sees when He looks at you. He sees Christ, and He sees the man that He's making me into. He's making us more like Him, carrying us from glory to glory. There's so many blessed verses that are such an encouragement when you think about God. He who began a good work will carry it on to completion. So we're not who we will be for eternity, but we're heading more and more like Christ each day. But we'll screw it up, and we're going to need to ask for forgiveness. And others walking with us on the journey are going to screw it up and are going to offend us, and are going to need forgiveness as well. But remembering that about ourselves, but also remembering that about our brothers and sisters as well. Look, that's not the heart of them. The heart of them is not jacked up.
Right.
The heart of them has been made new in Christ, but there's still that remnant of that old self that's still there, and we still battle with.
yeah, and how do you get purified? Fire. How does gold? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
The crucible, right? Yeah.
Tom asked a good question in terms of it's not a matter of being unwilling to forgive, but it's not knowing how to forgive.
Oh, wow. That is a good question.
So, well, it's just this easy. No, it's not. But knowing how to forgive, I'm going to take this back to a story. I have some real issues and struggles with my dad. He did some things to me and my wife that probably didn't seem like that big of a deal, but had a huge effect on me. And some of it made me feel worthless. Some of it made me feel, all sorts of different ways. And he's passed. I have a lot of that in me.
Yeah.
And when we talk about, I don't know how to forgive, well, how do I forgive this person who can't recognize what they did was wrong? How do we forgive this person who won't accept responsibility for what they did? When we ask the question, how do we do that? We have to first realize that forgiveness isn't about the offender. It's about the offended. So when we say, how do we do that? We say, just as Christ said to me. You don't have to. What do I have to do? Do I have to reconcile myself first? Do we have reconciliation first? And if you hold up to your end, then I'll forgive you? No, that's backwards.
Right.
Do we need reparations first? Pay me back for what you've done wrong? And once you've paid me back, then we're going to be good? No, that's the opposite of forgiveness. So when we talk about how do we do that, you have to look at yourself and go, know what? The other person doesn't matter. I matter. And because I matter to God, they matter to me. I'm going to love them with the love that Christ gave me. And it doesn't make them any better person. That person could still be an abuser to you if you would continue to be in that. I would hope that you wouldn't be in that relationship anymore.
Right.
But there's distance in that relationship. You have felt abused. I felt abused. I felt hurt. I felt whatever. But I don't have to continue to lay hold of that hurt anymore. And it's hard because it begins with us. And when we've bought lies or we've internalized lies that people potentially have told us, then how do we just flip that switch?
Yeah.
So again,
it's really tough. Really tough.
I don't say that that's an easy thing. And that's the Ace, you just kind of went where I was going, this difference between forgiving and forgetting. I think people think that God forgets our sin. If God is God and God is all-knowing, God doesn't get brain damage in the middle of anything. So I believe he remembers all of our sins. That's why I spent the time saying he gives an account. We will give an account for all of those things. So if I were to do you wrong, I don't think you should return for me to continue to do you harm. I don't think Jesus said you need to return to your brother 490 times to let him continue to kick dirt on you. No, you need to forgive him, and you may actually have to separate. I mean, that's kind of what Paul had to do in his journey. There was times where Paul had to separate from one and to go be with another. And sometimes we have to do that. So I don't think we forget, and I don't know that we should totally forget. However, we should never hold it against them. And that's the tricky part.
That's tough.
It's not don't forget, because thus you end up in the same situation. But are you willing to not go, there you go again, you go again, I've been waiting for you to slip up? Because what you're doing is you never got back to kind of ground zero. You still kind of had those chains, and it just gave you opportunity. So, forgiving and forgetting are definitely two different things, and I don't think people are wrong to not forget, but you do have to move on. And if you're going to be in a relationship, you need to move past those wrongs, knowing that the forgetting, if you were the one who was wronged, I think it'd be better that I remember than you, because I don't want to make sure, I got to make sure I don't go back there again. But that's when we walk with people in forgiveness, we usually have the grace to be able to do that. And if we don't, then we're not going to. It's a practice thing.
100%. I like what Pastor Matt said too. He said, when I truly seek to understand the person who offended me, forgiving is a little easier. Sometimes putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And also I found too, kind of on the lines of that, is giving them the benefit of the doubt. You know what? They probably had good intentions. They probably weren't intending to harm me. And try to go with that first, and have the tough conversations, because sometimes you have to whenever you have those situations. But I like what you said too. In some ways, we think when we don't forgive, we're kind of lording it over them, but actually, we ourselves are putting the shackles on ourselves, and we're the ones held bound. They probably won't care after that conversation's over. It's not going to affect them day to day, month to month, year to year, or however long it goes on. But it will affect the person who was hurt. Those scars are deep, The hurt is real. And the cool thing about God is that we can take those hurts and those pains to him. He cares for us. Cast our cares on him. He cares for you. He has the grace and the ability to forgive. He'll never leave us or forsake us. He'll help us through that, which is a great blessing and a great promise. And I think he gives us the strength to forgive in ways, the superhuman strength sometimes to forgive great offenses. Because of that example, again, it always goes back to Jesus, right? We can look back and see what he did. In the case of the master and the unforgiving servant, he forgave so much. And when we look at that in perspective and we say comparison, hey, my brother hurt me, but compared to what I've done or compared to what God has done for me, how can I not forgive him? But these are hard issues. These are ones that we definitely deal with and struggle with. Forgiveness of ourselves, forgiveness of others. I like what you said too about sometimes you do have to distance yourself. You don't go back 490 times to keep getting abused. You need to be able to do that as well when the time is right, but not try to hold them prisoner somehow. Yeah. Because like I said, you yourselves are the ones that's tortured when you try to do that. So.
Yeah, but you relive that over and over and over. Yeah. And while you were speaking, again, I talked about real issues that I had with my dad. Yeah. If I could replay the whole thing over and he didn't say the things that he said, would I have tried to prove him wrong as much as I did?
Yeah.
So maybe was his method a little bit bad, but his intention was good?
Right.
Or was his method actually crappy?
Yeah.
But his intention really was it well intended?
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something that I feel like I'm closer to letting go now than I've ever been before.
Yeah.
But I do feel it every once in a while kind of creep back up, and I'm like, why in the world am I dealing with this?
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. So much wisdom from Pastor Danny in the chat as well, too, talking about after Peter denied Jesus, and then Jesus came to kind of restore that relationship after Jesus rose from the dead. Peter, do you love me?
Right.
Of course you know I love you, Lord. Not about, hey, Peter, do you remember what you did?
Right.
No.
Right.
Peter, do you love me? Yeah, of course. Yes. So feed my lamb, tend my sheep, feed my, and that restoration that we have in Christ is so important. And I also like Danny's reminder. It's beautiful, but it's kind of very impactful too for all eternity. Jesus' resurrected body contains the scars inflicted by sin, but his scars now have new meaning. They're a sign of glory. Right. So those scars, those consequences are there, but by his stripes we are healed.
Right.
And that's the crazy thing is on the other side of eternity, we'll all have bodies.
Right.
His is going to be the only ones that has scars. Imagine that. Right. These are things that are unfathomable when you think about it. This whole notion of forgiveness, how can I forgive? And the notion of what God did in order to give us forgiveness. It's unbelievable. And like I said, the consequences are eternal, but God can overcome evil with good. And God can kind of change the result. Even though somebody might intend it for evil, God intends, God will use it. God will overcome it with good. I think that's probably the best way to say it.
I'm a weird guy when it comes to Scripture, and when I read Scripture where it makes my mind go and stuff. And when Danny put out there, about Peter, do you love me? I think about what happened to Judas. What if Judas would have went to Jesus and Jesus said, "Hey Judas, do you love me?"
Wow.
Even though, Peter, he got the glory of building the church. The church was built upon that rock. Yeah. How different was Peter from Judas? Not at all. Except Judas decided that he couldn't forgive himself. Hey, I returned the money. I tried to make restitution, reparations, whatever you want to, whatever word you want to go.
Wow.
No.
Yeah.
But he couldn't deal with the weight of that. And so when I think about some of those things, it kind of makes me, the reason why I start taking that exact same question, because that's the stuff that Jesus is saying to us. It's not just in the book about telling us about Jesus and Peter's relationship.
Yeah.
It's about Jesus and all of our relationships.
Yep.
And, when I think I'm as my dirtiest, slimiest self, can I hear Jesus say, "Paul, do you love me?" Yes, Jesus, I love you. All right, well, let's go. Let's start doing this, Paul. Let's start building again.
Yep. Yep.
So.
And Tom's talking too about the notion that sometimes those bad feelings come back, and it's almost a discipline to say, you know what, I'm not going to dwell on this. I remind myself, I've forgiven, we've moved on.
Well, you guys did the picture of the kind of the sports picture when you guys created the thumbnail
the lacrosse,
for the service. So at some point in the service, I talked about we got to practice it. Forgiveness needs to be practiced.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is real heavy, weighty stuff, and we can't get there. Well, my question is, are we practicing it in the other things?
Yep.
Are we practicing it when I know my wife was holding dinner and I just ignored it and it was just like, whatever, she'll be fine. I got this to do, and this is important because this is God's work. Yep. Or whatever the case may be. Or it could just be something way more selfish. I just had to get one more hole in before the sun went down.
I'm doing God's work on the golf course.
Whatever the case may be. Which, again, seems very minimal.
Yep.
But to have such a love and such a open relationship with someone to be able to say those words, hey, you hurt me. I know what?
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And will you forgive me for that? Because I totally ignored you. I ignored the way you had felt. I became selfish. Forgive me for my selfishness.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's no big... The issue wasn't you didn't call me.
Yep.
The issue is I was so selfish that what I was doing became more important than what you were doing. And who gets to determine what side of the scale is the more worthy?
Yep.
And when it's all said and done, we need to be right.
Yep.
Our relationship needs to be right.
Yep.
And that's why we need to learn to ask for forgiveness.
Yep. Yep.
And I think it's hard. I just pretended like she had that conversation. It'd be hard for her to say those words. Hey, you really hurt me. It'd be easier for her to do what? I'll just ignore you and I'll just get you back a different way. I'll just get even because I know this is important to you, so I'll do that.
Yep.
And then I go, oh yeah, well I know this is important to you, so I'll get you one more. And that's where so much of our practice is tit for tat. And not genuine forgiveness of sin.
Yeah. So good.
See, exactly, Chantel. She'll burn dinner next time. Thanks a lot. So.
That's fun. But yeah. So this is good. This is a good discussion, and this is a hard topic. So I'll say that to all you out watching and in Chatland as well. That notion of practicing forgiveness is such a hard thing to do, but such a good thing to do.
Right.
And it's something that we all struggle with. So kind of learning and working through it. I think this is an opportunity too in group life where we can encourage one another to kind of forgive and to move forward and to challenge one another to do that. And that's tough as well. But I'm thankful for our small groups that we have at the church. Places where we can be real with one another. We can say, you know what, it's that somebody really hurt me and I'm having trouble forgiving. Can you pray for me? Can you pray with me? Can you help me work through this? Those are good opportunities, I think, to kind of share and walk in that. Even what you shared tonight about your dad, I know that there are many that struggle with that relationship in particular and other relationships. So just being honest and real. So if you're not in a small group, if you're not a member of Group Life, I encourage you to check that out. You can check out the TCACP app on the website. There's plenty of ways to get involved with Group Life. And it's a great way to kind of practice what we're learning here and to put it into practice. And one of our key environments, perhaps the most key environment of the church, is the Group Life ministry, which is pretty cool. So thank you. This has been a great discussion.
No, I've enjoyed it. So.
I want to close. I always like to close with a song recommendation. And this one, Johnny Crow and I have gone to a couple of concerts with We Are Messengers. Great group, We Are Messengers. The song is called Point to You. And the first line is, how can I forgive when I can't forgive myself? How can I move on when all I have is regrets? How can I fix you when I keep turning away? How can I make it past the noise with my shame? I know you want my heart, my bruises and my scars, so I'm coming as I am, the only way I can. And I point to you. It's always pointing back to Jesus when it comes to forgiveness. So it's a great song. We Are Messengers, Point to You. Check it out. And thank you again for being here. Thank you all for being here. And we'll see you next week on The Bridge.
Perfect. God bless you.
God bless.